Peter Parker has a chemistry test at 8 in the morning. He got home at 2. He fought 3 people on the way. He had 4 hours before morning and spent one of them stitching a hole in a suit he built himself because the last one got taken away. That is the actual job, not the punching, the scheduling. And here's the thing about the MCU films that I think gets missed. They are constantly, quietly showing you that Spider-Man does not work as a solo operation. Every single stretch where he seems to be handling New York, somebody else is holding him up. Stark builds the suit. Happy handles the logistics. Ned sits at a computer and does the part nobody sees. May provides the housing. And underneath all of it, the mask provides something more important than any of those, which I'll come back to. So the argument I want to make is this. Spider-Man wouldn't survive New York, and it has almost nothing to do with how strong he is. He's obviously strong enough. The problem is that one person cannot be an emergency service. And the failure happens in 4 places that have nothing to do with muscle: recovery, search, funding, and exposure. Let's start with his body, because that's the one everybody assumes is fine. The body cannot bank the damage. Take sleep first. Through Homecoming and Far From Home, he's a high school student. School starts around 7. If he's out on patrol until 1 or 2 in the morning, he's getting something like 4 hours. And this isn't a one-off. It's the pattern. It's every night. There's a well-known study from the transport industry that put people through 28 hours without sleep and separately gave them measured doses of alcohol. After 17 to 19 hours awake, performance on some tests was equivalent to, or worse, than a blood alcohol concentration of 0.05%. Response speeds were up to 50% slower. Push it to 24 hours, and you're at roughly 0.10%, which is over the legal driving limit in every American state. Now run Peter's timeline. Wakes at 6, goes to school, does homework, suits up. It's 1 in the morning, he's 19 hours into being awake, and he is about to enter a physical confrontation with an armed stranger. He is walking into a fight in a state that the trucking industry considers unfit to operate a vehicle. And crucially, one of the things sleep deprivation impairs is your ability to notice that you're impaired. Then there's tissue. A stress fracture, which is an overuse injury, from doing the same demanding thing without enough recovery, typically needs 6 to 8 weeks of rest. Just the swelling in the bone lining takes 4 to 6 weeks. Concussion symptoms usually resolve in 7 to 10 days, but the brain stays in a window of heightened vulnerability afterwards. And there's research on college football players showing white matter changes that were still present after 6 months of no-contact rest. Peter's recovery window between fights is measured in hours, and this is worth sitting with. Because overuse injuries are not dramatic. Nobody gets carried off. That's exactly what makes them dangerous. A stress fracture is what happens when tissue is loaded repeatedly, without being given enough time to rebuild between loads. The damage is invisible, right up until the moment the bone gives out. And the thing that produces it isn't one enormous impact. It's a completely ordinary amount of stress applied slightly too often, which is a precise description of what Spider-Man does every night of his life. And then there's the one I find genuinely fascinating, which is fuel. There's a study from last year that tracked 14 ultra-endurance athletes, runners, and cyclists and triathletes using isotope-labeled water to measure exactly how many calories they burned. During multi-day races, some of them hit 6 to 7 times their resting metabolic rate, around 7 or 8,000 calories a day. Enormous numbers. But across 30 and 52 weeks, the group averaged roughly 2.4 times resting rate. A few athletes exceeded 2.5, but only slightly. That makes it a useful long-term estimate rather than an absolute wall. The leading explanation isn't willpower. It's absorption. Past a certain point, the gut appears unable to take in calories fast enough, and the body starts drawing on itself to cover the difference. For a teenage male with a resting rate around 1,800 calories, that ceiling is somewhere near 4,500 a day, sustained. 6 hours a night of swinging, sprinting, climbing, and fighting is Tour de France territory. And tour riders burn 5,000 to 8,000 calories on the bike alone. Those riders do it for 23 days. With team chefs, nutritionists, and massage therapists, and then it ends. Peter does it year-round, on a student's budget, with nobody feeding him. That's the first structural problem. But honestly, it's not even the one that kills the operation fastest. This one is, he cannot find crime. This is the part that I think is genuinely underrated, because it's invisible. We're so used to seeing Spider-Man arrive that we never ask how he knew. New York City is roughly 302 square miles, across 5 boroughs, with something like 8.5 million people. The NYPD runs 78 patrol precincts, 12 transit districts, 9 housing service areas, and in recent years somewhere around 34,000 uniformed officers. And here's the important part. Those 34,000 officers, working in shifts, with cars and radios and GPS and a dispatch system, still average around 9.5 minutes to reach a critical crime in progress. They're not fast because they're everywhere. They're fast because somebody calls 911, a dispatcher takes the location, and the nearest unit gets routed to it. Policing is a logistics problem solved by a reporting network. The officers are the last step. Spider-Man has none of that. No dispatcher, no radio, no 911 feed. He finds crime by physically being directly above it at the moment it happens. Queens on its own is about 109 square miles. A street robbery is frequently over in under 2 minutes. The odds of one person moving along one corridor of the sky, happening to be over the correct block during that specific 2-minute window without anyone telling him where to go, are close to zero. And it gets worse when you think about what he's actually optimizing for. If he patrols where he lives, he covers a small, familiar area very well and misses the entire rest of the city. If he tries to cover the whole city, he spreads so thin that his density of coverage anywhere approaches nothing. There is no version of the route that solves this, because the problem isn't the route. The problem is that he's searching instead of being told. Compare that to how an ambulance works. An ambulance does not drive around hoping to encounter a heart attack. It sits at a station until a call routes it to an address. The entire value of the vehicle depends on the phone system attached to it. Take away the phone system, and you have an extremely fast, extremely well-equipped machine that finds almost nobody. And once you notice this, you cannot unnotice it in the films. Look at how often the story just hands him the answer. In Homecoming, the Stark suit has an interrogation mode, a tracker, and an onboard AI that does the analysis for him. In Far From Home, he gets pulled into the plot by a phone call from Nick Fury. In No Way Home, he's given targets directly. The screenwriters have to solve this problem, because if they didn't, the honest version of the movie is a teenager swinging around Queens for 6 hours and finding nothing. He isn't underpowered, he's uninformed. Those are completely different problems, and only one of them can be fixed by being stronger. Which brings me to the least cinematic problem in the entire franchise. He cannot afford himself. The suit is not his. That's not a small detail. That's the spine of Homecoming. Stark builds it, Stark lends it, and when Peter makes a mistake, Stark takes it back. The moment the funding disappears, he's immediately in a homemade outfit with obvious limitations, and the film is completely honest about how much worse it is. In Far From Home, he's running on Stark's estate. Edith is inherited hardware. Happy provides transport, cover, and equipment. And then No Way Home ends by removing all of it at once. No Stark support, no May, no family home. Nobody knows who he is. He's making his own suit in a small rented room from scratch. Now think about the running costs. 4,500 to 5,000 calories a day of real food in New York City is a serious monthly grocery bill by itself. Before rent, before materials, in the MCU, the web fluid is his own chemistry, which means it's a consumable he has to fund and manufacture continuously, forever. And every hour on patrol is an hour not earning. 6 hours a night is a second full-time job that pays nothing, stacked on top of the first one, which means the opportunity cost alone before he spends a single dollar is roughly a full salary a year that he is choosing not to make. There's also a maintenance cost that never gets mentioned. Suits get torn, materials get used up, things get broken in fights, and some of those things belong to other people. In the real world, someone eventually sends a bill for the storefront window. Peter has no insurer, no department, and no budget line for property damage, which means every intervention has an uncosted financial tail attached to it that somebody is absorbing, and it isn't him, because he can't. So here is the pattern, and I think it's the cleanest evidence in the whole argument. Every period where Spider-Man's operation looks sustainable is a period where someone else is paying for it. When the funding stops, the operation visibly degrades, on screen, immediately. And there's one more thing being subsidized that nobody thinks of as a cost: the mask. We tend to read the secret identity as a protection for the people around him, and it is that. But functionally, it's also the only liability insurance he has. Police operate with statutory arrest authority, departmental lawyers, and municipal indemnification. And in some federal civil rights cases, qualified immunity. Peter has none of that. Not the authority, not the lawyers, not the indemnification, and certainly not the immunity, which has never applied to private citizens. And New York makes private arrest genuinely risky. Under the statute, a felony must actually have occurred, or another offense must have been committed in the person's presence. Notice what that word actually is doing. It isn't asking whether you reasonably believed a crime happened. It's asking whether one did. Get that wrong, and the belief doesn't save you. So every single intervention carries a tail risk. Grab the wrong person, misread a situation, break someone's arm, stopping what turns out to be an argument, And there is nothing standing between Peter Parker and a civil suit, except the fact that nobody knows his name, which is exactly what the films keep taking away from him. The Vulture works out who he is in Homecoming. Not through technology, but by noticing a pattern. Same neighborhood, same school, same handful of people. Mysterio broadcasts his name to the world at the end of Far From Home, and No Way Home is 2.5 hours of the consequences. Now let me put the strongest objection, because there's a good one, and it deserves better than a shrug. The obvious response is, he has superpowers, and you've just priced him like an ordinary human. Enhanced healing probably compresses those injury timelines enormously. Enhanced strength and metabolism change what the same movement actually costs him. Spider-Sense arguably solves part of the search problem by pulling his attention toward danger, and he's been operating for years across his previous MCU appearances. So the model has to be wrong somewhere. That's a real objection, and it's partly right. But I think it moves the numbers without touching the structure. Take healing. Faster healing doesn't remove the biological bill. It raises it. Tissue repair is metabolically expensive. A body that closes a wound in hours instead of weeks is doing the same construction work on a compressed schedule, which requires more fuel, not less. Enhanced healing makes the calorie problem, and therefore the money problem worse, not better. Take Spider-Sense. It's a proximity alarm. It warns him about immediate danger to himself. It has never been depicted as a citywide crime sensor, and it can't be, because the actual problem is a mugging happening 3 miles away in a building he can't see. Spider-Sense doesn't dispatch. And then there are the two pillars that no power touches at all. No amount of strength generates income. No amount of agility creates qualified immunity. Money and legal exposure survive the superpower objection completely intact. There's a version of this objection that's harder, though, and I want to give it properly. Someone could say, the comics have addressed a lot of this. In the comics, Peter has held jobs, had institutional backing at various points, and worked alongside other heroes who function as an informal network. That's true. But it's also the concession, not the rebuttal, because what it describes is Spider-Man acquiring the exact infrastructure I've been arguing he needs. The moment the character becomes sustainable, it's because somebody built a system around him. And the MCU version specifically has spent every previous appearance moving in the opposite direction, subtracting one piece of that system at a time. But the strongest evidence isn't any of my arithmetic. It's the films themselves, because they agree with this. Every single one of them is structured around the support network, and the emotional climax of each one is that network being taken away. The suit gets confiscated. The mentor dies. The identity gets exposed. The aunt dies. The friends forget him. The story keeps returning to the same idea, which is that the hard part was never the fighting. So where does that leave the question? Spider-Man doesn't need more power. He needs a dispatcher, a budget, a physiotherapist, and a lawyer. He needs the boring infrastructure that turns a person who can help into a service that reliably arrives. Every functional emergency response system on Earth is built out of exactly that, and none of it is heroic. And all of it is the reason the system works. The tragedy of Peter Parker isn't that the city is too dangerous for him. It's that he's trying to do a job that requires an organization, and he keeps being told that wanting help is a character flaw. And Brand New Day begins with the official premise of a man fighting crime full-time in a city that no longer knows his name, which is to say, alone, which is the one thing every previous appearance spent its entire running time proving he cannot be.